organized.
I did see Kylie come in just now. So, hi Kylie. We just finished up introduction. So if you want, you could what did we do?
All right, so the outline for today is we're going to be going through six main topics, six main ideas, I guess you could say. So first, we're going to be talking about defining your project. And then second, we're going to be talking about how you are going to operate the project. Then we're going to be talking about background research and what literature review is, data collection and what qualitative versus quantitative and what they mean. Analyzing data, so selecting appropriate statistical tests. And to wrap everything up and to help you with your own projects, we'll be sharing some resources to guide you through the process.
All right. So one thing that is really important in science in general is getting your terminology right and making sure that you are using precise language. So the first thing that I wanted to go over and clear up, which I think a lot of people often sort of use interchangeably, but they're actually different, is methodology and methods. So methodology should not be confused with your research methods, and methodology basically describes a theory of how research should be conducted and encompasses every aspect of the research project. So from identifying the problem that you're going to research all the way to your analysis, presentation, paper writing. Whereas, so it's kind of the lens through which you'll analyze your results, and there's a lot of different ways you can go about that. And research methodology is the specific, or research methods is the specific procedure techniques used to identify, select, process, analyze, etc. The information about your research topic, and it follows the scientific investigation principles. And then methods is the technique and procedure that you use to obtain the data. So this is obviously an integral part within methodology, but it's not the same. And so it's essentially looking at, what are the tools that you're going to be using to obtain your data for your research. So think like is the bulk of the data coming from survey, questionnaire responses, is it a case study, are you doing textual analysis, etc. And so to sum this up, I like to just think of methodology as how you'll answer your research question, and method is what you'll actually be doing to collect the data to answer your question. So yeah, that's kind of some.
All right, so there are two classifications of research. There's basic and applied. Basic is trying to improve and extend on a common body of knowledge. Applied research is when you are facing a problem and looking to solve it, and focuses on a smaller problem not faced by everyone. Most research conducted in universities is categorized as basic research, where the findings have a significant value to society. Basic research is more analytical and explanatory in nature. It's more theory-based, and you would be analyzing data samples to collect more information about them. And applied research tends to be more action-oriented, relies on examining empirical evidence for answers, and it's more descriptive. So here we have a little infographic for you to refer to.
And next one's about qualitative versus quantitative approaches, as you guys definitely have all heard of. And this are just like the two major research paradigms. And basically quantitative research condenses observations into data for the purposes of analysis for an objective perspective. And this is based on a social science application of the scientific method. It its like emphasis is on collecting and analyzing information in the form of numbers that measure distinct attributes. This can fall into three approaches: descriptive, how much, how often. We're going to get into the examples of each one later on between the two. And comparatively, the difference between is usually between like the variables. The behavior is normally distributed. And for qualitative research, it's a description and interpretation of observations from a biased subjective perspective. And this, the researcher is passive and listens to the views of the participants generally, and is more about gaining like an insight than the empirical generalizations.
All right, so next we included kind of this flow chart that we're probably going to be, or that we'll continue to reference throughout this presentation, but I wanted to put it out here first because I think it does a good job sort of highlighting the key steps. And so while all of you may be doing things and it's not as linear as we may present it to be, but this kind of will give you like more or less the equation of how you can come about to conduct your research. And so one thing that you want to consider or just like keep in mind is you're a researcher and you're looking into a problem and collecting data and essentially contributing to a dialogue within the discipline of study that you're choosing. So some of you are doing physics, bio, chem, organic chemistry, etc. Like with anything, it's really important that you consider this as a process and understand that you will need to repeatedly revise your research. So like again, back into, it's not a linear process. You're going to have to go back and refine certain steps, but you kind of just use this as a general guide. And so now we'll go into the various stages of research methodology. So there's kind of 6 that people tend to look at. So the first is identification, which refers to actually identifying the problem. A lot of you are going to have this based on what your mentor tells you your research problem is. And then the second ingredient is, the second ingredient is actually collecting your data. So this is the evidence that you'll use to then process and analyze and essentially like look into your problem more. And then analysis is the third step, followed by dissemination, which is used to make your final decision. And lastly, you want to be able to use this information in a meaningful way and present this to your target audience. So in our case, our target audience is obviously kind of the rest of you, because you'll all be presenting this at Temple. Yeah.
All right, so after you ask your question and work through the methods and methodology, you're going to define your project in more clear terms. So when you define your project, you use the five W's, I guess you could say. So if you maybe don't know where to start or kind of lost on what specific topic you want to look into, you could break down the problem you want to explore into easier to answer questions. So the first W is who. So when you're looking at literature or your topic or any specific project, ask yourself who has conducted similar research, who will benefit from this new project that I might be doing, or who will benefit from previous studies, and who has funded those projects. This will give you an idea as to who, like what parties are interested in the project and how it has impacted past groups of people. The second W is what. So what has happened with this type of study? What was done to complete it? What methods were involved? And what were the results and the conclusion? So this could help you maybe see the structure of the project, help you kind of understand why they did what they did with the study, and obviously like what the results were and how you could use that information for your own project. The third W is where. So where did the similar studies take place? Maybe this could tell you a little bit about interest. Is it based on countries, regions, which organization, and geographical location? So similar thing. Is there a stronger interest in certain places? What does that tell you about your topic? When is the fourth W. So when to perform specific activities related to the project. Is it time sensitive? Is it not? And when can the data be found as well? That's also, you have to be mindful of time if that's an issue for your project. And the last one is why. So probably the most important one, I guess. Why should this happen? Why is this project important to society, to a specific field of work? And why is there a need for it? So these are all questions that you should be asking yourself as you make your own project. All right, so first, you have to formulate a topic. This is where you identify some issue that needs to be solved. You have to think about what classification your research falls under and then determine the topic in question. Note that the more clear your research subject and question is, the better your research project will go. This stage is arguably the most important as it sets precedent for the rest of your research. Your area of interest should be narrowed down so that you can focus on one topic and not have too much information coming at you from all different sides. And so also do some preliminary research on your general topic, give yourself some context as to what you're looking into. Maybe you find something more interesting than your initial idea, and then you can kind of go more specific into different directions. Third tip is to consider your audience. Who will this be impacting? Who will you be talking to? Start asking questions, kind of goes with choosing your topic. Evaluate your question, so honing in on, what this could mean, what kind of planning would be involved. And then after you select your topic and do the first 5, you can then begin your research. So I just threw an example here. This is kind of what I guess the process would look like. So let's say you are interested in GMOs and you want to learn more about GMOs in food. Well, this isn't really where do you go from here? You can't really structure a project just based on your curiosity on one broad topic. So you dive a little deeper and you think, okay, so what is the effect of GMOs on humans when introduced to the diet? Pretty good, but we can go a little more specific. Do antibiotic resistant genes in genetically modified plants impact human health? This is more specific. It covers a topic that you might be interested in, and you could do a lot of research and actually structure your project with more purpose with that more specific question. So this is kind of like, I wanted to show you maybe what you could be going through in terms of formulating a topic. All right, I think I talk about this as well. So in your project planning guide that I've shared with you or that you'll get later today, I have the first section where you'll put your notes. So after today, if you type them or written them down somewhere, put them where it says 1 program orientation intro to research, just so we can track like your attendance, what you've been doing with your notes, etc. In terms of what we just went through with asking yourself a question, methodology, that will be under week 1, getting started. So we're expecting you to meet with your faculty mentor the week of June 9 to 15, and just going through identifying a problem or question and methodology with them. So you would be asking yourself, okay, how many hours per week will I be working in the lab? When will I be doing my weekly check-ins? What kind of topic am I supposed to be getting into? And if your faculty mentor has like papers that they want you to review, you would also take note of that here. So just wanted to show you like where in the planning guide this part of the process is.
Okay, so back to earlier when we were talking about the qualitative versus quantitative. So these are just 2 really basic examples of qualitative. So the first one's what variable had the largest impact on the growth of the plants in the lab experiment? And the second one is how does having too much water affect plants when under very cool conditions? These are just really random examples just to gain an understanding. And this obviously is qualitative, focusing more on descriptive instead of measured numbers, as we're going to see in the next slide. So the next slide is how does the number of particles in an atom change when reacting with other atoms? And what is the percentage of growth of a plant from 1 week to 6 weeks? And this is, as you can see, this is focusing on something that you can actually measure rather than necessarily a description between the 2. So it's a very easy way to distinguish between quantitative is quantity.
So next we're gonna sort of do a brief overview of background research. So I'm sure that a lot of you in high school have had experience with sort of doing your own research, or not like own research, but using literature to write a paper. So it's something similar when you want to do this for a scientific research article. So we're going to kind of go through some search engines that are commonly used, and then the best way to approach finding your research articles. And so in order to really solidify your research question, after you do the first step that Hajra just went over, you want to then conduct background research on that topic. And so this will tell you what has been studied before and essentially will allow you to become some sort of an expert, at least on the broader idea of the topic. So, if you're trying to learn about a specific cardiovascular disease, maybe just getting general understanding of how that works. And so what does that even mean, right? Like all of those backgrounds, like understanding and laying the foundation. And so while it seems really straightforward, it's actually really time consuming. And when you do start reading higher level scientific papers, it will probably take you some time to really understand all the information. I know that when I had started, I would read a lot of parts multiple times over and over again, and would have to ask my mentor very specific questions, which is totally okay. And the goal here is kind of to determine what has already been done regarding your topic, and then while also seeing, what are the deficits of knowledge that currently exist within that discipline. And so that will kind of allow you to understand and determine if your research is going to provide a large contribution to the scientific community and really understand the impact. And so, you obviously want to focus more on areas that are understudied and sort of filling in those gaps of knowledge. And during this stage, you should be able to revise your previous topic and question based on sort of the gaps that you determine are present. It will also allow you to determine the appropriate methodology and approaches that other experts in the field have used. So while you not only look up papers, but also read them, you certainly want to pay really close attention to how each paper went about answering a question that may or may not be sort of similar to you. And this will, and also, statistical analysis that was used, and then limitations to all papers. And this will allow you to kind of refine your own research approach and maybe take a few of the strong points of all the different research and then formulate it into your own. And so obviously you would look in books, journals, and index publications on your own topic. Some of your research will be, the bulk of it will be on the basis of literature review. Some of you have an experimental and more like data collection focus. And in which, like either case, you'll be spending a lot of your time reading through papers. So this is certainly a skill that you want. And so the first thing that I just wanted to go, this isn't super important, but kind of just defining types of research paper or types of research. So there's primary research. This is when you're physically collecting data and extracting. So if you're, in a chemistry lab, right, if you're measuring different chemicals and reaction rates and et cetera, and then publish a paper, that would be considered primary research, and you aren't necessarily depending on existing data to formulate your answer. And so a lot of you will be reading paper that looks at this. And then secondary research is where you look at existing papers and body of knowledge. And so rather than conducting your own experiment, you're basically completing a meta-analysis of multiple papers and trying to draw conclusions from there. So again, I'm only mentioning this here because you kind of want to know what type of paper you're reading. And also some of you will be doing primary research and some of you will be doing secondary research. And so in reference to the planning guide that we have, so we kind of have these for weeks 2 and onward, but this is when you want to start to collect the background research and begin to, find your own papers. Most of your PIs should give you starting papers, so it will at least give you a good intro, but then you should certainly continue to look for more and share them with your PI as you find them. So we just have what findings have you seen that interested you, and then what information will you collect, etc. Again, this is just to help you, but also so that we can keep track of what you're doing. And so in regards to actually executing finding research articles, there are a lot of search engines that you use and databases available. They're all free. So traditionally, I'm sure in high school, you kind of were used to just searching your questions straight into Google. You don't want to do that when you look for scientific articles because the standard is a lot higher. So you really want to find peer-reviewed papers that have been verified and checked by people, by experts in that field. So I listed a few common search engines that you use. I think the most common is PubMed. So I'm going to focus on how you would approach finding some articles for you to read in PubMed. So I'm kind of curious, has anyone here ever used any of these? Maybe Google Scholar?
I've used PubMed before.
You have? Okay, that's good. I feel like it's a very common thing that pretty much anyone that does research uses it. And so, yeah, I guess I didn't expect many of you. But when you want to build your search, there are, again, a few ways to kind of structure it. So you want to obviously have your research question. It helps when you break that research question into key concepts, because like I said earlier, you're not just plugging in your exact research question into a search box, you're using key concepts essentially. And so with that in mind, you will also then need to find some keywords. So they're pretty much synonyms for your key concepts just to expand your search. And then PubMed and some other databases actually have a mesh search strategy, which I'll like briefly go over. It's really useful, and basically just make sure that you're getting all relevant papers in your topic. And then there's like formality, so making sure that you're using and or when you formulate your search, and then using the advanced page to execute the search. My advice would be to build your search in a Google Doc and then transfer it into the PubMed like search box. And I'll kind of go over what that looks like. So say for instance, you want to look at lifestyle and its effect for heart disease. So that's a pretty broad question. That's also not really a good research question, but for the purpose of simplicity, we'll go with that. So I would look at these and see your key concepts as lifestyle and heart disease. And so I'd want to focus on those two terms. So for lifestyle, that encompasses a lot of things. So you can think of diet, exercise, healthy, sedentary behavior, etc. And then heart disease, you could go under the name of cardiovascular incident, you can begin naming some. So, heart attack, CAD, peripheral artery disease, etc. So there's a lot of things that go under the umbrella key concepts that you have. And so the idea of when you formulate a search is you want to make sure that you're including all of those terms that might be used instead of the one that you put in your question, if that makes sense. And so there's basically the thing called MESH, which addresses this. It helps to identify keywords for research questions. And a lot of the Medline articles in PubMed have the like index vocabulary. So it helps to really like expand the search. And so this kind of just comes off the idea because authors use different words for one concept, and the way that PubMed does your search is it will look for the keyword that you type in their search box and look at it in the title or the abstract, and it will come up. But obviously, if you had just typed in lifestyle, you would have missed anything that had used the other synonyms. So what you would do is do mesh and then your key concept word. So in this case, this one is really straightforward because PubMed has a mesh for heart disease under heart diseases. So it's kind of formulated like this when you actually end up searching. And you would just want to click add to search builder. And then I would do the same thing for lifestyle. And so to get a sense of like what really mesh means. So this is what will come up when you look for the mesh for heart disease. So there's a bunch of words that we would have missed had we just gone with our initial synonyms or just used heart disease. So there's cardiac disorders, there's arrhythmia, there's all of these things that PubMed will include. So now, just to summarize what you'd have, so you'd have your key concept, your keywords that you came up with, and then the mesh for that word, which will come from PubMed. So you'd want to put that together and build your search. So how that would look is formatting it properly. So you need to use OR to separate keywords and synonyms. And OR will also be used to separate the mesh term from the keywords, because you're saying, like diet or healthy lifestyle or like exercise, or if that makes sense, so that and then and means that both have to be included. So you would only use and when you're doing connecting your two different key concepts. So what that would look for ours would be your lifestyle mesh or your synonyms, and then and your heart disease mesh, and then the synonyms that you came up with. And I would plug that into PubMed. And so the way you would do that, you'd go onto the advanced search. Here we have almost 1 million or over 1 million searches for heart disease, even with all of that. So again, it really does expand your search. And then about 7 million for lifestyle. And then you would want to do both. So obviously when you combine the two, you narrow your results, you only end up with about 160K. And so it will, again, bold all the words that either came up from the mesh search or your synonym. And then you can also filter it further. So I would say try to look for papers that were within the last 10 years. It's a good rule of thumb. And so after doing all that, we have this many searches. It's a lot more manageable. You could even filter this out further if you wanted to. And so after you would do this, so I would keep going and refining it. So maybe there was a certain word, like a keyword that you included that you realize doesn't really make sense or you don't want in there. So I probably would have went back and like removed some stuff. And so you would just keep tweaking your search. And that's why I would say it really helps keeping it on a Google Doc, just so that you can keep track of what specific search you used that yielded good articles. And then lastly for this, we also have like a little Google sheet. This is an organizational method that I think works, but you're like more than free to sort of edit your own organizational method. But the basis is that you want to keep track of your research articles. So you want to obviously know the title, and you want to highlight any key information that you find there. So this is the format I had, or that we had made for you guys. Again, you can edit it, but it will help you a lot when you, as you go into your research and begin to forget certain things, but also when you put together a presentation, or that will be at the end of the year, end of the summer, you'll want to reference previous research articles. So this will really make that a lot easier. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so for like collecting data, that's the next step. And there's no one way to necessarily collect data. And we're gonna get to see that in the next slide. So as I said, there's experimental data, which I'm assuming all of you guys are pretty familiar with if you guys taking lab and chemistry courses and all that. This is the one that specific numbers, for example, that you'll be placing. However, there's different observations that are also really important, such as you notice a chemical is clear or something that you can be able to distinguish between the two, which is also something that you should be keeping in your notes. And this is, like, as I said, pivotal for data collection. Surveys, as you guys know, we've had you guys fill out some surveys for us. This is just another way of collecting data and meta-analysis and journal articles. And at the end of the day, it kind of just really depends on your lab. So one chemistry lab might be very different from another physics lab, and your PI will tell you what the data necessary they're looking for. So some are going to be more oriented towards experimental data. However, others are going to be checking maybe more journal articles and finding data through there. And it all really just depends. So this is just like a little advice for organization, as that seems to be the key theme today that we're trying to pin down. When you're creating file names, try to be as specific as possible, because when you're really broad, like experimental data number one, you're probably later down in the road when you need it, you're not going to remember necessarily. So it's just good to make sure that you distinguish between everything. And trust me, you want to back up all of your documents, because if they go, yeah, that's going to be difficult. And you should just never delete it. Even if you feel like you're done with it, don't, until like maybe like you're done with the whole research lab, maybe that you can delete the data, but never delete it just if you think you're done with it and you don't need it next week.
All right, so After you collect your data, you're going to need to find a way to analyze it and interpret it. So you will need to determine the best way to analyze and present your data in a way that your target audience can understand. So this will require using maybe certain software. How many of you guys know how to use Excel or even R or Python? You can just comment, raise your hand. I just want to say, okay, Isaiah. All right. So for analyzing data, it's good practice and a good skill to have to use Excel and some other basic coding that you might need. So if you would like to, I'm not sure if your PI will guide you through coding, but we suggest you guys learn R or Python because it will definitely make your analysis portion easier, especially when dealing with very large or very intensive data sets. And we have provided you guys with free resources to learn coding. It's a very in-demand skill, especially in STEM. So we certainly recommend you guys try it. It's in your packet. We'll share it with you guys. Actually, back in like December, I just wanted to try out R just to see like what I could do with it. And so over winter break, if you guys are familiar with LinkedIn Learning, I just like took a course on there, and it was really not that bad. I thought it would be overwhelming, but I learned a lot from it. And now I'm like kind of honing in more on specific topics using Swirl, which is a package in R. So I linked that in the resource packet because it's been really helpful. And Python as well could be useful depending on what you're trying to use your data for. So the first level of analyzing your data is descriptive analysis. So using summary statistics, trying to identify patterns. And then after you look at that, you want to analyze your data and infer conclusions from it. So this would be more complex. You were probably going to look at the relationship between multiple variables. And this is where you're going to generalize results, draw conclusions. So examples of this would include correlation, a relationship between two variables, regression analysis, which shows or predicts a relationship between two variables, or analysis of variance, which tests the extent to which two or more groups differ. So some of these terms may seem a little like new to you. That's totally okay. We have a workshop coming up on statistics, and we'll go into more detail about that. All right. Presenting data is the last part of our presentation, and the last part of your project, and it will consist of a page abstract and a poster board presentation. So in this step, you're going to basically put all of your findings and your whole process into one medium, one paper. So basically, you are going to include a brief description of your question and approach. So the methods that you used, the context, so any related research. You will present your results in tables, figures, any way that your audience can see your results in a clear way. Bar graphs, data tables, pie charts, any way to visualize your data. Most of the time, you would report numbers and percentages, but obviously it could depend on your lab. And tables are going to be they're going to be as detailed as possible, labeled, include annotations, highlight key results. You want to make sure whoever's looking at your poster has as much information about what you did as possible. And in the planning guide, we have basically just a place for you to take notes, highlight any key information that you want to put into your own poster or abstract. And at the end, we'll be asking you to meet with your faculty mentor and us, the Sprout Committee, just so we know where you guys are at. So yes, this is the results.
And lastly, we would have to mention ethical considerations, which is crucial and relevant in any lab project. And it really makes sure that you're holding the integrity of your work. And so ethical considerations should be built into the design. So obviously, you need to have honesty in reporting your data. So you need to be intentional with what statistical tests you're running on your data, and not intentionally trying to manipulate or deceive findings. And you'd be surprised, it's pretty easy to do that with stats. So you want to make sure that you're reporting the data and drawing conclusions in the most appropriate way that you can, and not try to mislead anyone that's reading your paper. Obviously, every study has its biases and limitations, and you should recognize and try as best as you can to resolve them, but there will naturally end up being some limit or some bias that you have, and you should make sure that you acknowledge that and are upfront with it. Obviously, you shouldn't plagiarize or use any other unethical means to obtain your data. So all these factors are primary indicators of validity and viability of your research. So the other thing, which I don't think most of you really are going to need, but if you ever are collecting confidential data, you actually need to uphold and report the confidentiality, and not report the confidentiality of other people if your study does have a human population that's being used for the bulk of your data. And it's obviously your study shouldn't harm any people. So we just wanted to mention this to make sure that you keep this in mind as you go about your research, that you're doing this with the best integrity and best intentions, so that your research is taken seriously.
Okay, so just a reminder for everyone that there is no one best way when doing research, and every research lab has different precautions and you have to take different steps and all that. So we really want to emphasize this because each of you are going to need to tailor the presentations that to best suit your needs. And it's also important to like we did it in a linear and successive way, in a way that we think is the general rule, but you're going to see that sometimes you're going to have to go back and forth between slides, and it's not necessarily you have to go step by step. And literature review is definitely an aspect that you should continue to do, and you should always be revising your process where appropriate. But yeah, you shouldn't just treat this as this one size fits all for everything, and you need to tailor it for your research individually.
And then lastly, so I had sent kind of late yesterday some resources that we put together. Some of you did ask if we had anything, which was kind of the reason that we sent it a little bit earlier, but it's still a work in progress. But we're trying to collect free and accessible guides that or resources that we found online that we've personally used. So there's free courses for coding. So well, first let me go over this. So first, the resources available to you are obviously Slack. You can reach out to any of us at any point. We respond pretty fast, and we want you guys to feel free to communicate. So it could honestly be anything that you want to talk about. Like, I don't want it to be a dead chat. And then we have the research project planning guide, which we talked about, or notebook. So in there, they'll have the informational packet. That's what we sent yesterday. And then your scientific reading tracker. Again, you can sort of structure it differently if you find that the way we have it doesn't necessarily work or isn't. We want you to use the stuff. So find the organizational system that works for you. And we just gave you some general how we would set this up. Obviously, you have your lab available. So all of you have a primary investigator. So your PIs, ask them questions. There is no such thing as a dumb question, especially because you guys are all high school students and you're already really ahead for doing this research. So ask if you don't understand something, if you can't read a paper. And then a lot of you also are going to be interacting with grad students, undergrad students, postdocs. And again, like all of these people volunteered because they want to help you. So you want to use them. Don't feel like you're a burden or anything. And then obviously there's us. So there's the three of us, but then there's also Alina and Athene. And then there's one other person, but she's not here. And so they're also here to support you and answer any questions. So pretty much all available 24/7. And then in terms of resources for you to kind of use by yourself, so Harvard offers a lot of free courses. So I've done one of these, Hajra's doing one right now. I feel like we could both probably say that they're really like straightforward. They have like quizzes at the end of the modules. And then it honestly teaches you enough. And then on top of that, there's so many different YouTube videos if you want to learn how to code. There's a lot of forums that you can use, and I can even send you some. And then for some of you that are doing genetic research, you want to familiarize yourself with ClinVar and how do you read and understand sort of the genomic symbol, because it's kind of the nomenclature is written kind of differently than how you think. Some of you are using Mathematica, so we have free courses that you could use to learn how to use that. Obviously, this is all in addition to like us, but these are things that you can do independently and sort of take initiative and learn. And so again, we'll continue to update. If at any point you think we're missing something, just let us know and we can try to find some relevant resources and just add it for everyone.
So yeah, another resource that we have is the student hour tracker, where as you can see, the example for June, we have already the workshops built in and important dates for the program. And this is just really a place for you to kind of like track your hours, where we want everyone to get at least like 10 a week. So it's really good that you can visualize this and basically plan out how you want to spend your week during your research. And for the attendance, obviously the lab meetings, if applicable, so some people I know are going in person and some people are online, so it really all just depends. Everyone has to meet with their faculty mentor / like their PI at least once per week. Just double check, make sure you guys are all on the same page, keeping track, and then peer mentor check-in. So everyone was assigned, all of you are assigned with one of us, and we want to meet like bi-weekly, just check up on just really basic questions, want to make sure that you're progressing really well. And yeah, and these educational workshops that we have that are bi-weekly at Saturday at 9 a.m. Obviously, 9 a.m. is the goal, but we'll always try to accommodate for whatever everyone else wants. So yeah.
All right, so I would like to just go more in detail about the planning guide, just to really share with you what you guys should be doing from now until the beginning of the program. So Selma, if you could stop sharing. Okay. All right, do you guys see my screen? I might be frozen.
It's just loading that you're sharing your screen.
Okay. All right, am I here? Yes. Okay, so here is the, I guess, packet of materials that we made for you. So you have 4 documents. We went over the planning guide, the informational packet, the reading tracker, and the hour tracker. So let me go through the planning guide in more detail. This is going to basically be an all-in-one document that you are going to be actively tracking your progress, at least for Sprout. You might have other things for your own lab, but for Sprout, this is how we would like you to take note of what you've been doing. So I put the Zoom link here for you to just easily click whenever we meet. This is where you would put your notes for today. And it doesn't have to be very detailed. It could just be basic information that you might want to use down the line. So after you take notes on your workshops, I have a week 1 getting started section. So this is going to be for you and your faculty mentor to schedule a meeting, a Zoom meeting, and work through, identify a problem or question, and methodology. Okay, so in this meeting, you want to basically just hash out the structure of your lab. Will your project be in person, virtual, or hybrid? If it's in person or hybrid, email us to discuss transportation. This will just basically give you like some sort of structure for your project. And then also in the same meeting, you would probably talk to them about your problem or question. So you would probably ask your mentor stuff like, what is my role in your lab? What are some specific papers, links, or articles that you could give me? And use this section to really hone in on your topic and finalize the concept that you'll be working through. And then we will be asking you exactly what your identified problem or question is. So hopefully your notes will help you with that. And then methodology is the, let me see, second part in your meeting. So you are probably going to write here what kind of data you'll collect, who to collect it from, sampling design, it's also called, so literature, how to collect it, primary, secondary, things like that, and how to analyze it. So you might not know some of these all at once, but do take note of what you do know and maybe throw in some action items down the line if you do know more about how you're going to work through your project. So we'll be having questions for you to answer. We'll have you guys fill these out. And these are after you define, or after you meet with your mentor. So it would be nice for you to meet with them as soon as possible. Maybe some of them have already reached out to you, but we're expecting that you take initiative and basically introduce yourself and say that you're looking forward to the project and you'd like to schedule a one-on-one meeting with them. So after your meeting, take some time to define your project. I just put by June 15, but it could depend on your own timeline. We'll have you state your research proposal. These are just some questions that you should be thinking about. We have a link to your hour tracker, a timeline. So this is where you'll be planning, like, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, from 1 to 3, I'm going to be doing research. So this is just for you to plan that out. And then we mentioned the research aspect. I have it weeks 2 to 9, just because you'll probably be gathering as much information as you can throughout the summer. And these questions will be due June 30th. We'll probably check in with you, your peer mentor will check in with you on that. And then finally, you will put all your information together under results. And I have these final set of questions due by Monday. So you'll be reflecting on what you've done and how you created your poster, things like that. Just some reflections for you. Okay, I think I pretty much sped through this, but it's pretty, I made sure that the information is as clear as possible so that you can just read on your own time. But does anyone have any questions about this planning guide? If you don't have it yet, don't worry. I asked you all for your Gmail account, so whenever you have time, just email me that and I'll give you your own folder.